Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Private Ethan Kelly. We're honoured this evening to acknowledge retired Lieutenant Colonel Neil Smythe, a Malaya-Borneo veteran. We'd also like to welcome the Indian Army delegation, the Army Officers Preparation Program delegation, and members of the Rivers and Ranges Community Leadership Program. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Biddabar Public School, Warners Bay. From Victoria, Seaford North Primary School and Ringwood North Primary School. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting in 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Sergeant Reginald Starr. Reginald Starr was born in 1897 in Young, New South Wales, the son of Henry and Mary Starr. He was a member of the senior cadets for 4 years, and after his education found employment as a bookkeeper. In June 1915, Starr enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force at Liverpool Camp near Sydney. After a short period of initial training, he embarked on the transport ship Runic in August. Landing in Egypt, he immediately sailed for the Gallipoli Peninsula, where he joined his unit, the 18th Australian Infantry Battalion, at the end of September. The soldiers on Gallipoli endured poor quality water and unsanitary conditions, and Starr became ill in October. He was evacuated to the Australian hospital on Lemnos Island. With the withdrawal of Australian and Allied troops from Gallipoli in December, Starr returned to Egypt. By the end of January 1916, he had recovered and was training with his unit. In March, the 18th Battalion and most of the other Australian troops sailed to Marseille in France, and from there moved north to the battlefields of the Western Front. The battalion's first engagement was at Pozières. Starr was stationed in a forward trench when his unit was subjected to accidental shelling by Australian artillery, causing multiple casualties. He was evacuated to England, suffering from severe shell shock, as his service record put it. Starr recuperated in hospital until the middle of October. During his time in England, he met a young woman named Margaret, and the couple married. In early January 1917, he returned to France and rejoined the 18th Battalion. Showing promise as a soldier, he rose remarkably rapidly through the ranks, and in June, he was promoted to the rank of sergeant. During 1917, his unit was involved in heavy fighting in France at Wallencourt in February and Bullecourt in May. At the end of the year, the battalion fought in the campaign around the Belgian city of Ypres, taking part in attacks on Menin Road in September and at Pol Capelle in October. At the end of November, Starr was selected for further training as a musketry instructor. He undertook his instructor's course at Hayling Island, off the southern coast of England. In January 1918, he took a fortnight's leave in England. On returning to the 18th Battalion in February, the unit was in training in Belgium, but events soon saw the men back on the front line. In March 1918, the German army launched what would be its final major assault of the war, which became known as the German Spring Offensive. A key objective for the German forces was to capture the rail hub city of Amiens in northern France, splitting the British forces from their French allies in the south. British and Australian troops managed to halt the offensive in April at the town of Villers-Bretonneux. Starr and the 18th Battalion had been moved south to this town to help stop the German advance. In the first week of April, the 18th Battalion was in the front line at Villers-Bretonneux, during which time the men were targeted by German artillery and machine gun fire. At the end of the week, the unit was relieved and the men moved to billets to the smaller village of Gentel, behind the front lines. The battalion's war diary noted that this village's civilian population had been evacuated in the face of fighting, so there was plenty of straw for the men to sleep on, and the men had their first decent sleep for over a week. At 6 a.m. the next morning, the 9th of April 1918, the men were awoken by a German artillery barrage falling on the village. The farmhouse in which Starr was sleeping was hit by a shell, and he was badly wounded in the head. He was taken to the nearest dressing station, but he died of his wounds soon afterwards. He was 21 years old. Reg Starr is buried in the St. Pierre Military Cemetery, Amiens, alongside over 650 Commonwealth soldiers of the First World War. He was survived in England by his widow, Margaret, and in Australia by his father, Henry, and 3 brothers, Norman, Albert, and Ray. Sergeant Reginald Starr is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sergeant Reginald Starr, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen and students, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.